Well, Aubrey, I think we're getting close to 6:05.
Indeed. If you'd like to go ahead and kick it off, we're
Okay.
ready.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone can hear the audio here, as well as see the very clear video that we have for the Pleasantdale Park Master Plan. This is our second meeting that we're having tonight to discuss the future of Pleasantdale Park and what you guys would like to see in your neighborhood. I think it's very important. We know that we have a good user with the soccer club that would like to be there, but I think we also need to have an opportunity to discuss what you, the residents who live there all the time, would like to see. And with that, I just would like to remind everyone that this is being recorded. I believe we are streaming live right now over Zoom. With that, I'll turn it over to Aubrey.
Thanks, Commissioner Patrick. And I just wanted to give the opportunity for Chuck, if he'd like to make any remarks before we get started.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thanks to everyone for being a part of this plan. And thank you, Commissioner Patrick. You've been very supportive, and I know this is very important to you. We're really looking forward to making improvements at this park. And Han, you're all doing a good job. Looking forward to seeing the outcome. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chuck. All right, and then without further ado, we will get started. We, like the last time, if those of you in attendance were at the first meeting, we're going to be using an app called Pigeonhole Live. So have your browser or your smartphone ready, and I will go through some step-by-step instructions on how to utilize this. It's really easy, it's really fun, and that's where we will be directing all of you to provide comments and questions and feedback, and we have a couple polls included in the presentation as well. And so the agenda for today, we will just do a brief recap of the first meeting. I'll go over the Pigeonhole app how-to. We'll have just a quick introduction, Pigeonhole, and then we'll get into what everybody's here for and the meat of the content for this meeting, the concepts, and then we'll open up to a Q&A through the Pigeonhole app as well, and then we'll briefly go over next steps. And just to remind everybody, the master plan goals, we want to learn how you all use the park and how you want to use the park. We are here in the first meeting, we presented some general concept ideas and got a better understanding of what park programming and amenities that the community would like to see. And then now we've taken that feedback and refined that into two different concepts with refined amenity possibilities for your input today. And then for the third meeting, we will refine that into a single concept with the information that we get from you all, and we'll come back to pull that into one final master plan after that last meeting. So for the first meeting, what we heard was that the park right now is not fully used due to perception and single use, such as the locked gates and the soccer being the predominant use of the site. Safety concerns were another reason, as well as access issues. It's really difficult to get across Pleasantdale. There's a large apartment community across Pleasantdale, and so being able to provide safe access is important to get to the park. Kids need to be included with the elementary school adjacent and many families nearby. That's a high priority. And then including a variety of amenities for a wide diversity of people. Even though the elementary school and there are many families nearby, there are also folks without children. They'd like a park for all ages, for a greater diversity of users. And so that was also a major point of feedback that we heard in the meeting last time. The majority preference was a combination of concepts B and C, And so you will see in both of our options today that we have kind of done two different variations of that to garner further feedback. So these were the three concepts from the first meeting back at the end of March. And this first concept A was keeping a lot of the soccer usage similarly and having three different fields with the central shelter and some complementary uses and new parking. The concept B kept one field on the southeastern portion of the site and then concentrated the playground and a covered soccer multi-use field on the northern portion of the site. And then the concept C kind of shifted or flipped concept B and had the multi-use field towards the northern portion of the site and a covered field basketball and pickleball. Both of those concepts had larger playgrounds and also some elements such as nature play and outdoor classrooms and dog park. And so before we jump into the concepts, we'll just go through a quick little pigeonhole how-to and some introductory questions to help everybody get used to using it. It's very easy and fun on your browser. If you go to pigeonhole.at, you can access this meeting session with the code PD8LE2. You can also do the same on your smartphone by scanning the QR code or entering that same website.
Aubrey, if I could interrupt just 1 second.
Absolutely.
Do want to acknowledge that we have Board of Education member Allison Gebertz that has logged on and joined us. And so I just want to say a very special thank you to her. And I believe we may have someone from Congresswoman McBath's office on as well. But I haven't gotten a final confirmation on that just yet. But I do want to acknowledge some of our other colleagues, other elected officials that have attended this meeting. Very happy to have you guys here with us and very grateful for your time. Okay, Allison, thank you. Or Aubrey, I apologize.
No worries. Thank you. And thank you all for attending and participating in this meeting. So the next screen that you'll see when you get here, and probably most of you have already sailed through this, but this is where you enter the passcode. And then you'll see that this is from March, but we have 3 sessions. We have the introduction session, we have a concept and amenities session, and then we have a Q&A. And so on this screen, you can see down in the lower right-hand corner, there's a toggle button. You can actually change the language of Pigeonhole to your native language or the language that you're most comfortable using. And so that is an option within the app. And here you can click on the polls to cast your votes. So we have the introduction poll and the concept poll. And then later on in this presentation, we'll get to Q&A, and I'll do another brief refresher when we get to that. But for this, we'll be going into the introduction. And then you'll see a series of questions with options, and you can select your response and click next. And that should bring you to the questions. And I am going to just switch gears here real quickly so we can take a look. And so in this web browser, we can actually see the live voting for the questions for the introduction. And so this first question is, do you live within the walking distance of Pleasantdale Park? And it is jumping through. So we have about 66% of the folks. We can see how many participants and how many votes that we have here total. 1 vote per question. So we have 66, almost 67% that do not live within walking distance. Our age range looks like we're predominantly in the 46 to 60.
I'm part of that group. Sorry, I got old.
How often do you use Pleasantdale Park? It looks like we have most folks on the call here use it a few times a month. And then do you feel safe at the park when you use it? Oops. Pigeonhole has a bit of a mind of its own. So we have about 50% yes, 8% no, sometimes 33%, and about 8% that don't use the park. So we'll go back to the presentation. So it looks like everybody's really gotten the hang of that. I encourage, if you haven't signed into Pigeonhole, to go ahead to pigeonhole.at and use the code PDALE2 to vote and go through the questions. And with that, we'll keep moving. And so first, before we go into the concepts, I did want to make mention that in both concepts, these are the amenities that would be included: an ADA bicycle path, interior ADA walks, an upper loop and a lower loop. And for the final concept, we're going to work really hard to connect those in multiple places. And we just have to take a closer look at the grading when we do that. Both concepts have shelters with grills, a playground, nature play and a nature trail, exercise stations, rain gardens with native plants. It's important, and we heard that it was important to preserve existing trees and to use that as a screen and the understory there, and then new canopy tree plantings where possible for additional shade. And so here is just a general representation of many of the features and site furnishings that you'll see in both concepts as well. And these images are representative. They're not necessarily what they'll look like when they're implemented at the park, but they're just to give a general idea of what these features can look like. And so we would be looking at a bike trail or a path around the outside of the park. The outside edge of the park is one big loop, one big biking and walking loop around the park. We heard grills were really important, and so we'll incorporate those. Bike racks, nature trail, and a walking trail. So these would be the ADA upper and lower loops within each concept. Water fountains, exercise stations, rain gardens, and the planting areas between the different amenities. You know, some different types of fencing are potential options, you know, around the fields, and then also maybe around the playgrounds and between site features and Pleasantdale. You know, looking at fencing options that are see-through, but also help ensure safety where needed. Swinging benches is something that we heard that folks wanted to have on site, and then just your standard park bench that DeKalb County uses. And so this is concept A, and this concept, the major features, and I would ask you all as I go through the concepts, I'll go through concept A and concept B and then images of all of the amenities. So if you could please take notes while I'm walking through these concepts on what you like, on what you might like to see differently, on your thoughts, on questions, and we'll get to a poll where you'll be able to provide your input on which concept you prefer, and then also what amenities you prefer as well. And we will also still have opportunity at the end to have a question and answer session where we can answer your specific questions or comments. So for this first concept, we have, and we're showing a covered field, and I'll go through and we have images that represent each of these major elements too. So I'll go through this rendering quickly and then we'll look at the imagery next. We have a large central play feature, a jog run. We would preserve the existing parking. Spaces in between parking and features. We would fit rain gardens or edible and sensory landscape. Central to the site would be a large shelter with grills, with restroom, with concession, and potentially a small meeting space. So the shelter would be open air, and then the restroom, concession, small meeting space would be enclosed. A space for a movie lawn, just to the south of the shelter. Outdoor classrooms where the existing playground is right now. Again, preserving existing trees on this western boundary and on the southern boundary along Valley Bluff Way. And then incorporating a nature play. Right now, there's an existing drive that comes in here, and there's the older buildings and facilities, and those would all be demolished. And so then we would look at implementing this outer bike pathway. You'll be able to see this a little bit better on the next slides. We have a diagram illustrating those features. But then that nature play with just logs and stepping stones and different things where there could be a little trail alongside that, and then a little space in between where kids can really just have at it and have a good time on the edge of the tree area here.
Aubrey, just to interrupt for one second, if you'd go back to that other slide, with the covered playing field, is that the right size for game of soccer, or does it have to be something larger like your multi-use field that you have on the other side of the park?
It is the right size for a game of soccer, and it would be using a smaller field size. I think here's kind of an example of that right here in this upper left-hand corner. And kind of doing some preliminary research, that tends to be when you have a covered soccer field, that tends to be more of the size for that. When you get into the larger field sizes, you're really looking at a pretty significant structure and cost for that. So this covered field, this inner area here, this inner square that you see is the 40 by 60. And then we've allowed for a little bit of additional space, whether that be storage, whether that just be a place for the teams to gather before they go on the field. And that configuration would, flex a little bit as we go through the different design iterations, but it's just to kind of allow for programming space in the design development.
Okay, all right.
Good question. And so here you'll see the representative images, and I'll go through, I just kind of wanted to show all of these together, and I'll go through each of these with the diagram, because you'll see the color coding actually keys to the diagram over the site plan. And the playground imagery, you'll see playground imagery on this slide, as well as for concept B. And it's really, we're including it more just as representative images. The goals with the playground would be to have universal and accessible play, not only for differently abled children, but also for adults and parents and grandparents and different types of caretakers, so that they can actually participate in the play with the kids. And the same with the nature play. And I think nature play is a lot easier to do that because it's more free form. But with some of the play elements that we're showing, like this image A4, you can see an adult with a child actually using a very wide slide. And so we really like that idea of being able to allow for those interactions between caregivers and the children. So we'll go to the next slide. And so here we have the images color coded. If you see this red boundary color coded to the covered field here, just to give a better idea of, okay, well, this image actually is what we're thinking of for this space over here in red for the covered field. This purple boundary here for the playground is one type of element that could be utilized in the play. And the way that we're kind of envisioning the playground, because this is a pretty large area, is that there would be a central open kind of field play space, and then the different structures or play elements could be arranged around that play space. And then the way that topography works on the site, right now this is where the existing bleachers are, and there's significant grade change from this sort of upper level where the buildings are down to this field level. It could really use that grade, whether it's a slope or a wall, for features like slides or climbing. And there's just a lot of possibilities that in the next iteration we'll get into a little bit more. I think what we're looking for feedback on concept A versus concept B is where the playground would be located, and just kind of general consensus that, okay, this is where we'd like the playground. We like these types of features, and we like these types of amenities. And then we'll delve into a little bit more detailed design in the next concept iteration. Here is just an image of a dog park. That would be up adjacent to the parking lot up here, the existing parking lot. And so elements that we'd like to include in the dog park would be a safe entry gate, and a space for kind of a 2-gate system that you see at a lot of dog parks, as well as shade and seating for dog owners. So if we go to this next slide, again, an example of the nature play. So that's this dark green, and then that would be located on the plan over here. And just for kind of orientation as well, the parking for the elementary school is right here. This is the new road to the elementary school, and the elementary school is kind of up off to the left and northwest of the site here. Playground image A2. This is a nice kind of universal accessible swing that anybody can use. So this is one type of thing that could be included. And then edible sensory landscape could be things, the idea is that it would be low maintenance. So something that parks can maintain well throughout the year. And it would include things like potentially, there's a term in permaculture called plant guilds. And so those kind of include things like an overstory, like a fruit tree, like a service berry or an apple tree, and then an understory or kind of a mid-story level of something like a blueberry, and then a ground cover like a strawberry, and those all work together. The ground cover, it acts as a green living mulch. You get berries and fruits at different times of the season, and they all work together to help that guild be less maintenance. And so we would be looking at things like that, as well as herbs and things that you can go and touch and feel and smell, rosemary, thyme, things that can be planted and pretty much do well on their own with little water.
I'll say that's a nice concept. I know one of my fellow commissioners has been advocating for, I guess, an edible vegetation component to a lot of our libraries within the county. And so I think that dovetails very nicely with that concept.
Love edible landscapes. And then this last slide is just some additional imagery on play features. There are different equipment that are available that have climbing nets and separate features that are kind of strung together so children can go from each one and have varying levels of challenge, and so they can decide, oh, this one, I don't know if this is really right for me. They can hop off, or they can keep going and keep climbing. And so we would be looking at multiple layers of challenge for different age groups of children and things that would keep them coming back. And it's not just going to be a one-time visit. It's a visit that would continue interest throughout their growth.
Sort of a long-term draw for all the kids in the neighborhood. It's easy to walk over there, easy to access the place. There's lots of amenities, restroom and concession stand being important things, especially on a hot day.
Absolutely.
It's very nice. Hey, just a question for the movie lawn.
Mhm.
Is that something that could possibly have like a bandstand? So in case there was a local band or some kind of entertainment on a Friday night or a Saturday night, that would be sort of the right place that could accommodate that, or is that something you might put somewhere else within either of
I
these?
think I think it could, on whatever kind of option that we land on. In concept B, you'll see that we have one that might be more accommodating for a bandstand. For this option, and just as we were developing it, the thought that it would be kind of more of a passive space where, you know, you could roll in the inflatable movie screen and bring your chairs, but it could also be used for other functions if you wanted to have a small market, that type of thing. But it could certainly, you know, I think we could certainly fit a small bandstand. It would just mean kind of testing that space with how many attendees that you think that you might want to use it for, kind of as a maximum. And so we could definitely look into that for sure for the final concept, if that's something that folks would like to see.
Yeah, ultimately, it's up to the residents to sort of advocate for any of the nice ideas that are out there, or nice options that are out there. So,
But I do like that is a nice feature to have, and maybe it's something that's sort of kind of hooked up with the shelter, or maybe it's something that we want to kind of separate from the shelter so that you could have two different activities going on at the same time if you wanted to.
right, that's a good idea. Okay.
Yeah. So then here was just kind of a general image of that movie lawn, and, you know, using an inflatable screen, and you know, just like a Wednesday movie night or a Friday movie night where you show a Disney movie of sorts, or a community movie is kind of the thought behind that. And then adjacent to that, kind of in the wooded area where the existing playground is, this image of kind of showing outdoor classroom. And the idea behind that is it would be more rustic. It would have rocks that you could sit on, or log rounds, or you know, kind of more rustic park benches. Some picnic tables could be included in there, but it's just kind of really meant to be more of a passive rustic space that could be used if the elementary school wanted to bring a group of kids over to have class outside, that it would be able to accommodate something like that.
Nice.
And so this is concept B. And to your point, Commissioner Patrick, here's kind of where we were showing more of a flexible formal event lawn, where, you know, we're showing a shelter here, but this could be a flex shelter, you know, that still has the grills, maybe still has a restroom, but it could also be used as a bandstand or a stage. And then, you know, maybe some kind of a slope feature and something at the top. So it's more of a formal space that could still be used. You can line up tents along these edges and have different markets and festivals and that sort of thing. And just kind of having some adjacency to this existing parking would make this really easy to load into and out of if you did have a small band, or a speaker, or needing kind of some AV information in here. That's something that could happen in there if that's desired. And the other major elements, again, this does also focus and centralized play. The difference between concept A and concept B is we go from a large shelter to 3 small ones. So there would be the shelter here, the flexible event space lawn, there would be a shelter here at the playground, and there would be another shelter up here adjacent to this open play, and each would have grills. And the playground and the one here adjacent to the parking would and could have restrooms as well. And so here, yes.
Oh, no, I like what you're saying.
Okay, I thought you were about to say something. So this one has the multi-use field on the north side and then a smaller open play 40 by 60 on the southeastern side. This one again is surrounded by edible sensory landscape. And then here, instead of a covered soccer multi-use field, we have covered basketball and pickleball. And this design maintains the existing drive and adds some parallel parking, mostly on the park side. We have a few spaces right here and incorporates an emergency turnaround for fire trucks and ambulances and a few spaces for ADA parking on this side of the park. And then we have, and instead of the movie lawn and outdoor classrooms, we have the nature play located here just adjacent to the main playground area. So then you have kind of those two different experiences adjacent to one another. Again, this playground, many of the same elements, utilizing the slope here from the upper field down to the lower field for slides, for climbing elements, and just using that grade to our advantage to create a really fun and interesting feature. And then on this multi-use field, we renovate the bleachers and keep those in place on this side, the west side of the field, and then create sort of a viewing hill on the northeast side of the field. And then this would be a small storage building and potential restroom on this part of the park, and then some connection over to the existing parking for the elementary school here. And both concepts would have that connection.
So Aubrey, just to ask a question, I have been to a couple cities in the past and noticed that they have sort of these, I don't know the right way to describe it, almost like an inflatable building. And then they have multiple tennis courts or soccer fields inside. Is something like that possible? You know, with the multi-use field, is it possible to have a larger covered structure over top of it? I just remember with my own kids, even on a field with AstroTurf in the middle of the summer, and it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the kids are sweltering and the parents are just wilting away, and they're under the shade as well. So is there something like that that would be possible?
We could look into that and
Okay.
see for that. We hadn't really looked into the larger size just from a cost standpoint, but we could certainly look into that. And if you had specific examples of where you visited, we could also look at those as well and see what they used.
Okay, yeah, great. All right, thank you.
Mhm. And so here are the images that are associated with concept B. Again, the playground, these are interchangeable for either concept, but we just wanted to show a wide range of what's possible. Here's an example of the covered basketball and pickleball. And so I'll go through each of these on the diagram so you can see where they land on the plan. And here is the covered basketball pickleball image in red, and that would be here in this south corner of the site. And this playground image is kind of more free form, a little more artistic, integrating color, more free play, playground elements. And then this viewing hill is located right here. So really it's just some grading and topography to kind of counter and provide another place for the viewing of the field opposite of the bleachers. Here's another example of what nature play looks like. So it's rustic stepping stones made out of logs. It's logs turned on their side. It's places for kids to jump in the dirt and get muddy and dirty and really experience nature in a semi-controlled environment.
Be kids, basically.
Be kids. And this image here, playground, this B2, this is for differently abled folks, but it's really set up for anybody to use it together. It could be anyone that wants to ride this. It's a spinning feature, and so we'd be looking at incorporating those into the playground element, something like this. And again, the edible sensory would be wrapping around this open play field and part of the covered basketball field and pickleball. Again, the multi-use, I feel like, is fairly self-explanatory, and that could be regular turf, or we could look at potentially having the smaller field as an AstroTurf. And the playground B3, this is another example of just how to use that slope with slides and different, there's little climbing features up the slope, and just even space to run up and down and tumble and roll. I mean, kids do that all the time, and so it's nice areas for seating and climbing.
Yeah. I hope in one of the areas there's maybe a consideration for like a splash pad of some sort. I know splash pads with the waters where the water jets shoot from the bottom can be tricky and problematic with maintenance, but I also know, I recall seeing a couple splash pads where they were almost like sunflowers that were probably 10 feet in the air and would sprinkle downwards, which are much easier to maintain. But I know with hot flowers, something like that would probably be much appreciated as well.
Yeah, anytime with the weather and the heat recently, those are very popular elements, and that's certainly something that could be fit into one end of this area in here as well.
Yeah, and then of course you'll have to have an ice cream shop, because you can't have a hot day with kids and no ice cream around. So
of course, at least an ice cream truck.
Yeah,
That would be nice. And then here, just an example of what a small shelter might look like. And so again, there's three. There's one up here by existing parking, one here with the playground, and then one up here adjacent to the open play. And so these could be rented out by families at different times. And that would be kind of the advantage to one singular large shelter, is you could accommodate multiple groups in this regard. And then here's just an example of a flexible lawn space, event space, setting up tents, space for walking around. And then it can be used however folks see fit, Frisbee, picnics, that sort of thing when it's not being used for an event. Here, I love this actually swing type. I swung on one of these with my daughter, and just the ability to be face to face is really incredible and just promotes that interaction and connection. And so this was something that could be incorporated into the play as well. And then just an image to, the bleachers would be renovated. We'd look at fixing the railings and cleaning up the surface and power washing it, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So, and I can also, as we're going through this next poll, I can go back to the images as well, the different concepts, but I hope you all were taking notes. So if we go back to the pigeonhole and we go to the amenity questions, let me back out of this here. Concept and amenities preference. And it looks like we already have a number of votes, and a combo of concept A and B always tends to be a preference, which is completely understandable and absolutely something that we can do. So I'll just kind of wait for folks to keep voting. So as you all continue to vote, I'll just kind of go back as a refresher to concept A. Oh, no. There it is. Here's concept A. This has the large multi-use field along Valley Bluff, the covered multi-use or soccer field on the north end, playground, one singular large shelter And we've got nature play, and we have no parking along this western edge, and then we have the dog park along Pleasantdale. And then concept B is here, so that's a little bit flipped. We've got the large multi-use field closer to the school on the northern side of the site. Flexible event lawn adjacent to Pleasantdale. And then we've got the covered basketball and pickleball and open play along Valley Bluff. And then we're maintaining the existing drive, emergency turnaround. We got play and nature play central to the plan. It looks like we've got 11 votes and 3 still participating. So it looks like where we are is a combo of A and B, which is fully what we expected to see. And then what amenities would you prefer? So I would say that this is 2-part questions. We have, I think a lot of these amenities can be mix and match and can be included on either concept. But I would ask that you either vote on this question for the large shelter, if you prefer the large shelter. And the next question has the multiple smaller shelters. So if you voted for one, I would ask that you not vote for the other. And then the same with the covered field. If you prefer the covered soccer field versus the basketball and pickleball, it looks like more people are preferring the basketball and pickleball. Voting for one versus the other is helpful.
And Aubrey, I've gotten a couple text messages while we were going through this.
Sure.
And I think one question, just to reiterate, is are we going to have an opportunity to sort of have an open discussion towards the end?
Yes.
I think that's
Yes.
okay. That's great. That's great. Okay.
We'll wait a little bit longer and let some of these votes come in. And we're about same on those numbers. Got some nature play. Looks like no preference on the movie lawn. No real preference on flexible spaces, but we see that people like shelters and the covered basketball and pickleball and the outdoor classroom.
Maybe if we reread into the numbers, the people are saying with the no need for a movie lawn, if we have that flexible space, perhaps it can be used as a movie lawn as well.
Correct.
In the future.
Correct. Okay. So then we'll go ahead and move into the Q&A portion. Oh, good. Here's the Pigeonhole passcode again. And back out of this guy, go to the Q&A. So you can go right into that Q&A, and as soon as you start asking questions, Matt Wilder, he'll be screening the questions for language, but otherwise, once you've input your question or comment, those will show up here. And we can start answering those. So always, the other thing that you all can do, you can vote on the questions. And so once you submit, and you can see on your screen a little vote button. And so we have one vote for this question here.
If I can add, today Congresswoman Lucy McBath actually joined us at Pleasantdale Park. And that was one of the discussion points we had with our planning director, or transportation planning director, Mr. David Pelton. And yes, latest update is we have ordered the poles or the booms for holding the traffic lights, but we're still waiting on the contractor to sign the contract. And so once we have that other component taken care of, then those traffic lights will be installed there. There's also some discussion points on some mid-block crossings. Those are all coming up hopefully within the next 2 months. But we do got to be mindful of, with everything else, the supply chain issues that seem to affect everything else in life. It's also in fact affecting the infrastructure components of our daily lives as well. But they're on their way.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to the next question. Is there an existing DeKalb County park that these designs are modeled on? No, there's not.
So essentially, you're saying that we have the opportunity to be a little bit unique from what the existing mix is within the county's supply of parks.
Absolutely.
And I've noticed some of the parks have some nice differences between them, sort of a unique characteristic to its own. It doesn't look sort of replicated all across the board or all across the county.
The county has a poor history of maintaining their parks. What is their plan to maintain these new additions?
So you have, by asking that question, you've sort of hit on a larger issue for the county to talk about over the next year. Right now, we have a 1 penny splost that's going into essentially a lot of maintenance and road repair. And so the question is what should we do with the next splost that comes along? Should we keep sort of what we have, which sort of focuses in on maintenance and repairs for what we have, or do we look into something bigger, more of a what I consider like a Gwinnett County style splost, where it can do maintenance and repair, but it also can do new stuff coming into the county as well? That's a great question, and that's something that we will be having a much bigger conversation about over the next year.
Are there plans to connect the sidewalks that don't go all the way to Pleasantdale Road?
I love that great question as well. So I've actually found a contractor that is going to go through certain roads within District 1, and I believe Pleasantdale was one of those roads, to do a sidewalk assessment and detail if there's any problems. You know, we walk down a sidewalk, you'll see some areas where sometimes the roots are heaving up the different concrete plates. This will be an assessment to see where they are, if there's any problems, any cracks, any damages. And sort of by definition, as they're only focusing in on the areas where sidewalks are, we're going to get a map that shows where there's no sidewalks within District 1. And so my plan, tentative as it is right now, is to, towards the fall, have another public engagement with unincorporated District 1 residents about where sidewalks are and how do we prioritize those connections that we need to make. Do we need to talk about making things wider or just simply fixing what we've got? So those will be conversations that we have coming up. But great question. Thank you.
Was there a concession stand meeting room in the plans presented? Yes, that was in concept A. So that was included in the shelter with restrooms, concession, meeting room, and shelter space.
And again, from what I've seen from other parks, sometimes having those meeting rooms, they serve as sort of a community focus point where people can get together. Not just for what the community is interested in, but you can also have birthday parties there. I always pronounce this wrong. I believe it's quinceañera within the Spanish culture, that sweet 15 birthday. Another great place where that could be recognized.
Yep.
And I apologize, my pronunciation is terrible. I acknowledge that.
We like the idea of a water feature. Would a flowing, accessible play creek like through the Brook Run playground be a good idea, especially given the topography? Something that we could look into for the final concept.
I'll say I would take my kids over to the Brook Run Park and they enjoyed it, but this is just a parent's perception, so it's not accurate. I apologize. But it did seem like at times debris would get into the filters and it would clog up and it would not work a good portion of the summer sometimes. I love the idea. I think it's a great idea. We may not need to look into something that kind of addresses the mechanical issues that go with it, just to be on the safe side though.
And that's kind of the idea too. I know it doesn't incorporate water, but having just sort of the nature play, there's different ways that can be really interesting without going through and making major modifications to the site and topography and grading and cost. Any type of water feature is going to be of a higher cost. And so, we want to be able to provide as much bang for the buck in terms of what folks can interact with and also being mindful of maintenance as well.
Yeah. Again, going back to that one question for a quick sec, just again, some experience I've had. I know that when you have a splash pad where the water kind of shoots up from the ground, that can be mechanically challenging and can get expensive, as you were just talking about, Aubrey. But I hope that if there's something where it's sort of like flowers or showers sort of angled down, where it still is like a sprinkler almost, that would be able to sort of get that moment where the kids have a good time still, and the parents. My wife and I have been known to jump in there too, so.
Myself as well.
I mean, the kids have it right. If you're hot, cool off in the water. So.
Exactly. The options are appreciated. Do we have visitor projections with and without various features? We do not have visitor projections. We're still working on getting closer to an option and providing feedback. And so that's something that we could look at for the final option when we get to that.
Now, here's that question might actually be good for Chuck if he's available. From the Parks Master Plan, I forget, but what category would a park such as Pleasantdale Park fit into? Is that going to be sort of a regional park, or is that sort of a larger neighborhood park?
Probably a larger neighborhood park. It does have the feature of regional with the multi-use play field, sports field, but it's right in there in between. I think it's like a large neighborhood park.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Timeline for moving forward. How is everything being funded? Will it be in stages?
Now, that's a good question. I know that we have some money set aside in SPLOST. I have made some requests with our mid-year budget. So I'm hopeful that discussion will come forward. It may be something that needs to be planned out or paid for in stages, but that'll be, I think, part of the questions typically I've seen in planning documents such as this, is you guys sort of get into the details on what are the funding options, what's a realistic timeline for this to be implemented with it.
And so we'll be looking into the cost for the third option when we come back and present for a third time. So that concept will have a cost to it. And then from that point, once that plan is approved, it will have to go into construction documentation and bidding and CA. And so as we get closer to that, we can update that timeline and let you all know the specifics. Have the amenities of Pleasantdale Elementary School been taken into consideration? They have lawn, multiple playgrounds, and the same footprint. And we did look at that, and what we heard from the last meeting is that play was still very important to have multiple options. And that was a big component of what folks wanted to see in the playground, and they wanted to have a playground at this park. And so that was part of that. With the lawn, there was some discussion as far as kind of sharing that, but I don't know. I know that Chuck and Paige had been talking about that, but we had not come to a final conclusion on the ability to do that.
Well, since we have a Board of Education member on, I'm hoping she's flexible and amenable, but I won't put her on the spot for that. But certainly willing to look into what's possible. Of course, we'd have to have our staff level people talk and see what's doable to get to that if it's possible.
Where can we send specific feedback about the options? I can provide my email address in the chat, and so you can send me specific feedback about the options, but we would prefer, if you do have feedback, to actually put it as a comment in this Q&A, because that's what this group and this session and this time is for, and we'd like others to have the opportunity to see the feedback and respond to that as well. And so multiple options, but this is our time to talk about it together and talk about the specific things that we like and don't like about the concepts. How many active parks are in Commissioner Patrick's district?
So under the 2010 District 1 boundaries, or County Commission district boundaries, I believe it's just Pleasantdale Park. With the redistricting, my district now takes up all of Chamblee, but it also pushes down towards Shalford Road on the north side and sort of north side of Briarcliff area, Briarcliff Road, pardon me. And so I believe there's at least one more park that's being included in there. We have been sort of looking around in the area to see if there would be an opportunity for another park. Expected coming January 23, we'll have 2 parks for sure. And then also looking into the possibility of maybe some smaller pocket parks that would definitely be more intended for people that live within walking distance. So they may not necessarily have parking spaces available, but it's sort of, if you're in the neighborhood, there's a place where you can conveniently go over and have your kids run around or take a nice walk and sort of relax in the neighborhood.
For some things, the dog park is a great addition, because right now the school's fenced and lawn is being used as a dog park.
Thanks.
And we don't want kids stepping in leave behinds. That's a good point.
You know, Rebecca, thank you. We need that input right there. And perhaps we can look into some other things in the rights of way that can address that. That's a great concern. And as someone who has kids, I don't want that to happen to my kids. So yeah, we'll look into that one.
Hearing we need some doggy bag stations as well.
Those would be very helpful.
Here's a nice comment. As a 20-year resident of Northcrest, I'm grateful Pleasantdale is being targeted for improvement. The community deserves a working park. Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for grills to be with the shelter and restroom areas? It's a nice adjacency, but we can also provide just some grill areas that aren't associated with the shelters. So that is a good point, and we can incorporate that. prefer option A, but switch out the covered open field for the covered basketball and pickleball. Thank you. That's great feedback.
Thank you.
And if folks, if you're looking at all of these options and you see someone's comment that you like, you can vote for it. You can add comments within each one of these. And so please continue to do this as we go through this Q&A session. The more input that you give us now, the more feedback. Just in this group session, it's really helpful for everybody to see it together. And it's helpful for the conversation. So thank you, Chris, for this comment. Thank you to the person who voted.
I think I know who anonymous is there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Is the goal for a unique park or model after utilization? I think the goal would be for the park to be used by the greatest amount of people. That would be my response, and to serve the community in the best way and to the community's desires. Athletic field space among the DCSD is lacking. Have they provided any input, or are they able to?
Now, Aubrey, I think you made mention that there was some conversations going on between the Board of Education and Board of Commissioner staff level. And so don't know where that's going right just yet. But I will say, at least for my part, happy to engage with our partners at the Board of Education to see if we can have something that ultimately is beneficial to everyone in the community.
Climate change and extreme heat, it would be great to have as many covered spaces as possible. Absolutely. I think even just being able to provide additional tree canopy will be very helpful, and you know, even just kind of having that tree line along the southern portion of the site and maintaining that is a good thing, as well as where the trees are around the existing playground, and then nestling shelters adjacent to that is really helpful to kind of capture that sort of passive cooling of the trees, in addition to providing sheltered spaces. So yes, and there are parts of this, a great majority of this park that's open. So providing those points of refuge is key. Are the Chiefs expected to continue as a park partner?
I think it would be absolutely reasonable to expect that. I hope they will. You know, the whole purpose of the planning public engagement phase of this is just to make sure that the residents have some say in what happens in the park as well, so that the amenities meet their needs as well as whatever the Chiefs ultimate goals are for the park. But I hope that they will continue to stick with us for this park renovation.
Sidewalks to Pleasantdale need adjustment, not only for repairs and adjustment, but for handicapped people too.
Understood. So sort of getting back to our conversation about SPLOST, one of the questions will be is, you know, if there's an existing sidewalk, what are the needs of the community? Is it something that needs to be upgraded into a trail? And I think trails typically start at about 8 feet in width, and I think you might find more typical 12 to 16 feet wide. So those will be part of the questions I think that can be handled through the SPLOST conversations. For those of you who are internet savvy, if you Google the Path Foundation, they had done a planning document that basically goes from the city of Brookhaven all the way up the North Fork, Peachtree Creek trail or proposed trail that goes nearby Pleasantdale Park, and then ultimately would look to end in Gwinnett County, and I forget the name of the park that's in Gwinnett County, right off of the county line. But yes, connectivity to our parks, I think, is very important. Connectivity to our homes and our parks is just as important. And if we can get connectivity to some of the grocery stores and make it more convenient for our residents to get out, to get to those places to shop, I think that's even more important. So it's on the radar. It's part of the priorities. It's just getting those things scheduled out. And as someone said, how do we pay for it all? And that'll be the conversation that we end up having over the next year through the Board of Commissioners.
Is it Best Friend Park? Is that where it ends?
That might be Best Friend Park. Yeah.
I think that's the park that's on the county line there.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that. Prefer keeping playing fields. They are so hard to find. Love having amenities around those spaces.
To that comment, if you look in a lot of communities, simple green space or park fields is a difficult thing to find. And that's why they're so critical. Absolutely. There's sort of the difficult thing, or I should say the thing my grandmother told me that you can never do is you can never have your cake and eat it too. And you're going to hopefully find a way to have some cake and keep it as well. So that's the purpose and goal of the planning options that we're going through right now.
Oh. Looks like we don't have any further questions.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Those were good questions. I really appreciate it. Let's do that one.
Harping on the signal light, please light a fire under the contractors since there are school kids and parents trying to cross during the year, which is only weeks away.
Understood. Again, the traffic light might be realistic. Again, talking with Mr. Pelton today, they have ordered them. I think there's an expectation that in the late August, September timeframe, but I'm going to say probably closer to October timeframe. But that's what we're aiming for. And again, it's all dependent on the supply chains, but I will be the fire that needs to be lighting things up. So thank you.
This person would like to know what will happen to the end of North Lake Drive. That area is not included in the park study, but maybe Commissioner Patrick has some thoughts on that space.
I don't right now, but if anonymous, if you have my contact information, by all means, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you. I will put my information in the chat. If I can get to it. And please reach out and we're happy to have that conversation.
I believe at the last meeting, there was some conversation around some folks wanted to see it as a space that could be used, and various thoughts and ideas were thrown out around for the use of that area. Any other comments or thoughts on the options and what you like and don't like, or what you'd like to see combined for the final plan? I know we saw the basketball and pickleball swap, but any other feedback on how you want to see those two plans combined? Please provide it at this time, and we can make sure to incorporate that.
Of course, if money was no object, we'd build the complete covered area for everybody to enjoy with all the amenities that were discussed. But we'll have to see what ultimately the residents want in the area, and then also talk about the budget. What do we have available for that?
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions.
Okay.
Just briefly.
Aubrey, just for point of clarification, Chris Hester texted me. Graves Park is the one that connects at the end of North Fork Creek Trail that's anticipated.
Great, Mark. Thank you. And so as we've mentioned, we're going to be developing a preferred concept from all of your provided input and feedback today. I'll be downloading this information, compiling it, and then we'll be developing it into the preferred concept along with the cost opinion. And then we will schedule that third meeting. So please keep abreast with your emails and your newsletter from Commissioner Patrick, and we'll have that third meeting, and we look forward to all of your feedback at that time.
Thank you very much, Aubrey. I sure appreciate your time. Chuck as well as Matt, and most definitely my colleague on the Board of Education, Board Member Allison Gevertz. I sure appreciate your time here with us as well. And to everyone else that's been here, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Okay. Yep. Good night. Bye.